just some reaction to some comments we got. So I'm going to read, Province Teacher Union saying, no teacher or community representative team has been invited to join the teams, the walkthrough teams.
Yeah.
And we have no confidence that inspections and needed fixes would be ready for September 2nd and 3rd for teacher orientation. What's your response to that?
So a few things. The teams that are doing the walkthroughs are interdisciplinary and filled with experts. So there's somebody from the Department of Health, a facilities expert, an air circulation expert, the National Guard, engineers. So they're really, I think that people should feel good about this. We're the only state in the country doing it. In fact, I was on a call yesterday with the White House and all the other governors and highlighting it, and I think now other governors will follow this. It's just an extra precaution so that folks can know that your school has been inspected before anybody steps foot in. It is true that it won't be done by September 2nd, but the goal is to have everything walk through before the kids come back, when there'll be a lot of people in the school building.
Mm-hmm. And one question from Ed Bush in Barrington, a parent. He said that he's concerned about security. If students have classes outside, we've been outfitting schools with all the newest technology. What about threats or even, just being outside bees and everything?
Yeah. So, look, it's an issue. I think we have to step back a second. This is a once in 100-year pandemic. This is highly unusual. It is a crisis. It's a global public health crisis. So it's not going to be great. We're trying to do the best that we can under extremely difficult circumstances to get kids back in school so they don't lose a whole year of learning. So the point that he makes is an excellent point. It's also one we've been thinking about, particularly the security. So we have put a lot of effort into that. Security folks have been making sure that if the kids are outside, same as if they were at recess, for example, we have extra security. But he's absolutely right. There are going to be bees and such, again, as there would be if the kids were out playing on the playground. But it's so much safer to be outside from the coronavirus that when we weigh the risks, we're recommending schools consider going outside.
Okay, and then one question from Providence teacher and parent Melissa Babcock. Providence is sticking to an August 19th deadline to choose the virtual learning academy. Parents were asked to make a decision before they had all the information necessary to adequately and appropriately determine what was safest. How are parents not able to make a decision for their children now that they have the required information?
So that, I think, is a better question for the superintendent in Providence. I'm not getting in the middle of individual cities and towns. What we did is we said there's a statewide schedule, September 14th. I do want to make one thing very clear. School starts September 14th. Everyone except Providence and Central Falls has the green light to get kids back in the classroom starting the 14th. We think most schools will stagger their start, kind of walk before they run, and we figure it'll take them until about October 13th until all kids are fully in school. However, if you want to keep your kid home, you can still do that. We had some confusion yesterday. People were saying, wait a minute, does that mean if I choose distance learning, my kids have to be in school by October 13th? No, it doesn't. So this mom, if she wants her kids to have distance learning, they can continue to have distance learning even after October 13th. But if you choose to put your kids in school, they go back the 14th, and they should be in school every day starting October 13th.
So for families with students who are medically fragile, what should they know that what the state is doing? Some parents in Portsmouth and Pawtucket came to my station saying that they are not going to have the IEP services, the nurses that are normally with their children all day because they're out of school, but they don't see how that works because the nurses are paid anyways.
Yeah. So I feel for those parents, and I would strongly encourage those parents to make their voices heard and have their rights as parents secured by their superintendent and school committees. Because every child by law in Rhode Island has a right to a quality, free public education. And I'm very disappointed in some school committees and some schools and some superintendents who, even though they've been cleared to open, even though they should open, have just said, no, we're not going to do it. And so, one of the reasons that we're doing the testing, for example, the state's doing the testing, is so that we don't overly burden the school nurses. So, we're doing everything we know how to do to enable the local districts to provide an education, including paraprofessionals, including nurses. And they need to step up and get the job done. And if you're a parent out there who feels like your community isn't doing that, you have a right to speak up for your child. I encourage you to do that. And if you need help, call my office and we'll help you out.
And one thing we've been hearing, no matter what, after yesterday, was that if students are going into the building, normally there's 20 to almost 30 students in a class. People are saying, doesn't that go against the state's social gathering, especially after talking about the Take It Outside campaign?
Yeah, no. And Dr. Alexander Scott went into this in great detail a couple of weeks ago, or maybe a week ago. So if it's a social gathering, like a party, Labor Day's coming up, I'm worried about backyard parties, so that's on my mind. If you have a barbecue in your backyard, or a wedding shower, or a pool party, people are close together, not wearing masks most likely, very likely to be in close proximity without a mask for more than 15 minutes. So for those kinds of real gatherings, we've said 15 is safest. In a classroom, that's not the way it is. Teachers will have masks, students will have masks, students will be a few feet apart, hopefully 6 feet apart. They'll be seated mainly, and they'll be in a stable pod. So there's a very big difference between a social gathering where there's mixing and mingling and eating and probably not a lot of mask wearing versus a stable classroom where children will have assigned seats, be primarily in their seat, wearing their mask, same pod every day.
And you mentioned that you were on the phone with Washington yesterday, all the governors. Can you give us a look into what's happening nationally, the conversations that you're having? I know I just saw right before we came in that New York delayed another week into September 21st. What are these conversations you're having?
They're difficult. I would say the same things we are struggling with here happening all over the country. There's a lot of anxiety, concern. Everybody wants to get it right. I think it's a fact that our children are really suffering and struggling because they've been out of school. And that's true. You hear it from every public health official, every pediatrician, every mental health expert all over the country, and every governor. The challenges we're having are these practical challenges of, do we have enough desks? Do we have enough masks? Can we actually keep kids in a stable pod? And I join these calls hoping to learn some lessons about how we can be better. And what you realize when you get on with 49 other governors is we're all doing the same thing and doing our best. And if anything, Rhode Island's ahead of the pack. I was called on yesterday by the vice president to share what's happening in Rhode Island. If anything, we're leading the way. And that should give people some confidence. But listen, I get it. I'm a mother. I have 2 kids. Our friends all have kids. It's an anxious time, but I think on balance, for most kids, it's the right thing to get back in the classroom.
And some rumblings from teachers emailing some of my colleagues saying that they're just going to refuse to go to in-person orientations. Yeah. How do you think districts should respond to that?
I don't think that's right. Let me say this. It is hard. You know yourself. You've had to go to work. You were probably nervous at first. And here in the state, we've had to get a lot of public workers back to work, and they've been anxious about it. The bus drivers, they've been working from the beginning. Social workers who work for DCYF, they've been working in person from the beginning, in close proximity to kids they take care of. The folks at the DMV have been working. The correctional officers, correctional officers have been locked into the ACI from day one. So every one of us has been afraid at one point in time. But we have jobs to do. Teachers are essential workers. We need teachers. We love teachers. We need them. So I fully hear the concern I do. And again, I've heard it from police officers, bus drivers, social workers. We are doing everything we know how to do to make it safe. They will have the PPE. We will keep them socially distant. We will have rapid testing. We'll do everything we can to improve the circulation of air. But at the end of the day, they have a job. These kids are depending on them. And if they, like your job, you have to show up to get paid. And I'm asking teachers to find the courage required to go to school and teach our kids.
And one last question. So I know we're going to go over this week during the news conferences, what school will look like. But just briefly, because a lot of people want to know, what's it going to look like in a Providence elementary school when they're all going back compared to, North Kingstown?
Yeah. It's going to look very different. It's going to look very different than last year, and towns will look very different. So, but, I think everyone will have a mask on. There's not going to be crowds in the hallways. Many schools, they're not going to be able to use the locker at all. Kids will be walking around with backpacks with their books. Lunch may happen in your classroom instead of the cafeteria. Everything will be much more scheduled. There'll be one-way traffic in the hallways, signs everywhere. It'll be a much more structured environment, so we keep everyone away from each other.
So what is the difference between, say, Carter Valley Elementary School going back full in person compared to saying that, the high school can't go back, the middle school can't? What is the difference? Why
Yes,
can
so
they?
that's an excellent question. We know from our research and from experts all over the country that the older kids, by and large, did a little bit better with the virtual learning. High school kids have done better learning on the computer at home than first, second, third, fourth graders. The littler kids really missed out in distance learning. And any parent or teacher who's ever spent time with the 6-year-old knows it's not realistic to think that they're going to log onto their computer on their own and pay attention for 6 hours and get an education. So as a result, the priority is to get the little kids back in school, regular school, with their teacher first. Same thing with kids with learning differences, same thing with kids who need extra help. And then also a great priority on transition years, 6th grade, 9th grade, and then over time easing into high schoolers. If we had the space, we would do everybody all at once. But it's a priority based upon what we know, who did a little bit better with distance learning and who struggled more with distance learning.
So it's more so just that and spatial limits than thinking these students are more at risk, these are more not.
Absolutely, yes. Thank you for asking. Yeah.
Okay.